Hello, Varlets. The first of the Skitari's arsenal deep dives is here, and it is for the Galvanic Rifle. This was the first weapon that I had an interest in exploring after learning about what we were getting with the class. Today, I want to explore every inch, every aspect, and uncover the potential this weapon can bring into your loadout. With that, let's start with the role of the Galvanic Rifle. Weapon purpose. The Galvanic Rifle is essentially the Mechanicus version of the M1 Garand. It is a semi-automatic infantry rifle that fights well at all ranges and can provide your team with devastatingly powerful firepower if you build it correctly. Like the M1 Garand, it also holds 8 rounds and has a 3.85 second reload speed via stripper clip, which also gives you the satisfying ping once you are done. While it has a decent 2.63 rounds per second fire rate, it is very much a precision rifle where you are going to want to wait for your rifle to settle after each shot to ensure the next one lands. Having only 8 rounds in a gun and a relatively low max ammo reserves means you'll want to make every shot count. Its weapon special is a bash attack similar to the Hellbore's bayonet thrust, but a lot less impressive. All of these characteristics put together makes it serve a very similar role to the revolvers. And just like the revolver, its low capacity and ammo reserves can be strained if you are using it as an all-purpose shooter to deal with regular range enemies in addition to elites and specials. Target prioritization is going to matter if you don't want to be running on empty very early on into a mission. Weapon stats. The Galvanic Rifle has a pretty straightforward combination of stats that makes identifying what you actually need to prioritize very easy. Ammo is of course going to be important since this determines your max reserves. The presence of a finesse stat usually means this weapon has a higher weak spot and critical multiplier that leans further into its identity as a precision weapon. Both the damage and stopping power stat contain modifiers to the Galvanic Rifle's ADM, meaning both of these stats influence how effective it's going to perform against all enemy armor types. Given the importance of all of these stats and how they have a direct impact on your damage output and effectiveness, you'll want to max out all of these stats at 80%. That leaves us with mobility as a dump stat at 60%. This is also where we see one of the weaker parts of the Galvanic Rifle, its mobility. While it has the same number of dodges as the revolver, it has a lower sprint speed and a much worse dodge distance. So where possible, you'll want to try and keep some distance from melee enemies. Moving on, let's talk about its damage profile. Off the bat, the Galvanic Rifle stands out with having a pretty strong but also all over the place damage profile. This has to do with its very odd ADM numbers on both its damage and stopping power stats. What stands out to me immediately is that its unarmored and flak bodyshot damage is really good. This hits hard enough that you can bodyshot range shooters easily, which makes taking them out a piece of cake since you don't need to aim for the head at all. This high overall base damage is then amplified even more by its finesse multipliers where the weak spot and critical hits on average deal about 2.2 times more damage than their already hard-hitting body shots. Meanwhile, the critical weak spot multiplier punches through the roof with 2.8 times more damage. If it wasn't clear enough already, this weapon wants you to land headshots and also leans into a one-shot, one-kill playstyle and build. Speaking of which, let's take a look at its blessing pool next. The Galvanic Rifle has a pretty diverse set of blessings that we can pick from to forge into a weapon to suit the loadout and playstyle we'd like to go for. The notable ones from this pool include Deadly Accurate, plus 60% critical weak spot damage is incredibly powerful on this weapon given its damage profile. Even with just the base damage and no other buffs, the addition of this blessing can give you anywhere between 450 to 800 more critical weak spot damage. If you are going down a critical focus path, then I think Deadly Accurate is going to be worth its weight in damage output. Hit-Hunter is going to be a natural candidate to pair with Deadly Accurate that gives you an increasing critical chance to score a heavy hitting shot. The Skitari class itself doesn't have a lot of critical chance woven into its base kit unless you specifically take the Advanced Combat Doctrine ability and its subnode. Manstopper is also a fun pairing to have with Hit-Hunter. This actually turns your Galvanic Rifle into a rail cannon of sorts that has infinite cleave. When combined with its very high base damage, you can actually mow down hordes surprisingly well. Opening Salvo works very well on this weapon because it has a relatively quick settle time after you fire a shot. In fact, if you aim down sights, the blessing resets itself basically as fast as you can fire and, practically speaking, works as a near permanent 20% strength buff. It is incredibly good to pair with the weapon and I can see this being a staple blessing for it. Pinpointing Target also shares a similar spot to Opening Salvo, but requires you to consistently be aiming down sights in order to get a lower 12.5% strength bonus. If this was 20% strength instead of 12%, I think it could be a viable pick, but as it stands right now, Opening Salvo is just a much better pick than Pinpointing Target. Lastly, we have Trick Shooter, which allows you to build up even more strength on your Galvanic Rifle for chaining weak spot hits on any target. The good news is that making use of this blessing is very easy, and it gels nicely with how you want to play with the weapon. The bad news is that the Galvanic Rifle only has 8 shots, so missing just one in the middle of your chain can set you back quite a bit in damage. If you invest into reload speed enough, and take the Advanced Combo Doctrine's ability, you can actually maintain this buff up quite consistently even in between reloads. With a firm grasp on how this weapon plays, what its strengths and weaknesses are, and what the build options you have with this blessing pool, what are some of the nice blessing combos you could potentially make use of? If you are going down a crit-centric build and want to dish out devastating heavy damage, Hit Hunter and Deadly Accurate are a natural pairing. This combo makes it so that you aren't reliant on your talent nodes to build up your critical chance, and if you would like to see big numbers pop up now and then, this is where it's going to be. Another combo, which I thought was interesting, is the Opening Shot and Trick Shooter one. This combo stacks together a lot of strength, amplifying damage buffs from your talents and leveraging the natural finesse multiplier of the weapon. This would make for a good generalist build. Personally, I'm really loving the mix of Opening Salvo and Hit Hunter. I think this gives me a good balance of having some strength to buff up my damage, but also a relatively consistent way of scoring critical hits for moments of burst damage. What you ultimately take is going to depend on what the purpose of your build is and how the Galvanic Rifle can best support it in that direction. Alright, that's it for the deep dive for the Galvanic Rifle. On the surface, it can seem a little plain when compared to the other 2 range weapons the Skitarii came with, but when built correctly, it can dish out punishment like no other. If this weapon needs any buffs at all, it would be to increase its max ammo reserves by about maybe 20%. This gives us a bit more freedom to take out enemies without feeling very tight on ammo all the time, especially in the higher difficulties like Havoc where ammo is already scarce. The only other buff I would want is for the reload ping to be a little louder. So far, I've been enjoying playing with this weapon and the Skitarius as a whole. I've already got maybe a couple of builds that I'm close to completing and sharing with you guys. If you want to be there when it drops, a subscribe to follow along would be nice. And if you're feeling generous, a like for this video goes a long way too. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Varlets.